All right, with that, we're going to turn to the movie we all watched for this episode, which is Withnail I, a 1987 kind of dark comedy, British comedy. As we usually do, kind of spoiler-free. Realize this movie is very old, but some viewers may not have seen it. So just without spoiling anything, what were your thoughts? Kind of how did you like the movie? Yeah.
Well, I'm interested to hear what you guys think first, because I've kind of grown up with this movie. I've seen it a fair amount of times, and I've known it since I was like a teenager. So it holds somewhat of a special place in my heart. Somewhat.
I mean, I can start. And just as an aside, in honor of this movie, I've been drinking this cold brew in honor of the Withnail, the titular character, who is an alcoholic. This movie reminded me a lot of, and actually when I was reading the Wikipedia page, apparently this is a direct inspiration to a lot of the kind of movies I was thinking in my head when I watched it. But apparently this was a direct inspiration for like Pineapple Express. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was actually the movie that came to mind most in my head about like a kind of a comparison, in the sense that it is a comedic movie about people who are constantly a little bit off their rocker. In this case, usually because of alcohol, but there are other substances involved, and it's kind of just a dark comedy, kind of about their lives. Nothing particularly amazing happens, but it doesn't need to because the characters are wacky enough to kind of carry the comedy. So overall, I would say that I enjoyed it. It was not the kind of movie that had me like in tears or, I doubled over laughing. I think the mood that I would kind of give as far as myself throughout the movie was it was amusing. Like the situations were amusing. Not necessarily hilarious or, I could, whatever, but it was amusing all the way throughout. So that, it wasn't a boring movie. It keeps your attention. The characters are fairly engaging. I wonder if I get the feeling, or I've heard both in the Wikipedia article and I think JL, you might have told me this before we even watched it, that like a lot of the humor might be more geared towards, like, I guess there's a lot of British kind of aphorisms and things in there that I necessarily don't really know or aren't familiar with in terms of how they speak. So I might be missing some of the jokes, is what I'm saying, by not being British. So like I recognize that I might be limited in that capacity, but I still enjoyed it. It's still an enjoyable movie. So I guess that's my thoughts.
All right. So I think I may have enjoyed it a little bit more than Braden. And perhaps I was just in the right mood, but I don't know. I think that I would have cracked up at this movie no matter what situation I was in. This is the spoiler-free portion, so I wish I could just quote the movie like over and over again at you to give a sense of what this movie is like. But it's there were parts when I was just scene after scene, and I was still laughing. It was just there's something about the way the characters deliver their lines that just so sincerely and saying such gibberish that it just hit me. I don't know how to put it, I suppose. And I also thought that the movie ended up being relatively profound. I think that you were right to bring up Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, because I actually think that it's similar in a lot of ways, like not only like in terms of humor in it often, but thematically as well.
Yeah, the end of an era thing. I mean, it's even
Right.
set in the same time period. I think was things that kind of paralleled both movies.
Yeah, it was. So I think it was dealing with other days, and so, but yeah, the fact that it was so funny and also like willing to be so heavy. And yet at the same time, I don't feel like it ever sacrificed either side of itself, of this like heaviness, this willingness to be a little bit morose, and this kind of absurd just dialogue-based comedy that I thought was hilarious. I don't know. I loved it, actually.
Yeah. It's actually interesting that you guys both bring up Fear and Loathing, because that's actually kind of how I managed to find out about this film. Because I think the original like cover art or poster for this film is illustrated by Ralph Steadman, who did the artwork for the original Fear and Loathing book. And so that's how I found out about this movie. And yeah, like I said, I've grown up with it. It's always been one of my favorite comedies. And I really like that kind of infinitely quotable aspect of it. It's like kind of like The Big Lebowski, where almost every line is just almost gold. Like you can just quote it, and it's fun. And the movie's strengths really rely, I think, or a lot of it comes from the screenplay and the performances. Richard E. Grant as Withnail is amazing. He gives a just one of the best performances ever as like a miserable drunken asshole. Like the kind of person you like hate probably to like hang out with in real life, but who's hilarious to watch on screen. And the funny thing is that actor doesn't even drink. Like he had never drank before or acting in that movie, and the director actually like had to force him. He's like, well, you have to get drunk at least once just to give some truth to your performance. And I think that's a testament to his acting chops, because he pulls it off with great skill. So yeah, this is like, I guess depending on who you are, like for me, I think the first time I see it, I wasn't necessarily laughing out loud like constantly, but I was kind of like Braden said, amused. I was very much enjoying it. Like it's just fun to see these characters interact, to hear their, I guess, gibberish. It's witty gibberish. And yeah, the movie, and I like the tone because there's kind of always this melancholic like cloud of despair kind of hanging over the film, but the movie treats it like somewhat like farcically. It's like you have to laugh at this or else like you'll want to kill yourself, something like that. Yeah, this is the thing. I've only ever met one other person in my life who knew this film, and they were from the UK. Like, from my experience, Americans just don't seem to know this film, which is kind of a shame, because it's like, it definitely deserves its status as a cult classic. It's, I don't know. It's a very well written, very well acted film.
So I guess the consensus is everyone liked it. You know, because I kind of like the our kind of like 3-star scale: good movie, bad movie, mediocre movie. I think we can say it's a good movie. You know, don't get too granular about like the 7 out of 10s or the 9 out of 10. You know, it was It's a good movie.
What's the difference between the 7 and an 8 anyway?
Exactly.
It is a good movie, and you should watch it. There.
I guess before we end the spoiler-free bit, just one final question that we like to ask here, which is, could you recommend this to anyone, or is there a specific type of person who might enjoy this movie and a type of person that might not?
So I think this is kind of a weird Rorschach test of a movie. because I do think maybe that this is not a movie for everyone, but at the same time, I don't know how you would determine that person until they've seen the movie. So I feel like put on the movie, watch it together, and if they respond positively, they're that type of person.
Fair enough. I guess I will say this. I think there is a fundamental difference between British and American comedy. I don't know if I could articulate it super well right now. I'm sure other people have written about this before. I'm sure I'm not the first person to come up with this idea. But this strikes me as very, very British comedy. And so if you are a fan of British comedy, then this is probably, you're going to enjoy this. If you've seen British comedy before and you're like, this is not, I don't like this style of comedy. I think that the difference is I think British comedy tends to be darker. It tends to be more.
Yeah, they're all miserable and they hate themselves.
Like that seems to be the joke, right? Like, I mean, there is. I don't want to pigeon it as if that's all a British comedy, but I think that tends to be kind of more true, as far as I can tell. So anyway, it's dark humor, so you have to like dark humor, and it's it's very British. So if those things sound appealing to you, then by all means go for it. If you're not a fan of dark comedy, if you're not a fan of British comedy, I guess for whatever reason, then maybe this one isn't for you.
Yeah, I'd say because a lot of the humor is very dialogue heavy, and if that's does that interest you?
It has some good slapstick
banter,
moments, though.
Back and forth. It definitely does, but a good chunk of it comes from the actual dialogue itself. So I'd say if that kind of that sounds appealing to you, then go for it. But I also think it's worth just watching for Richard E. Grant as Withnail. I love that performance. It's brilliant.